Good afternoon and welcome once again to the virtual press conference held by the government of Anguilla. I greet you today. Today is Labor Day in Anguilla and across the region, and I wish to extend the Labor Day greetings to all of you who are listening to us. Once again to the virtual press conference held by the government of Anguilla. I greet you today. Today is Labor Day in Anguilla and across the region, and I wish to acknowledge the presence of our Honorable Premier and members of Cabinet, members of the health team. We have joining us today Dr. Aidan Harrigan, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs. So welcome all. Dear God, on this Labor Day 2021, we give you thanks for all those workers who work in our shops and supermarkets, health services, hospitality sector and allied business sector, in churches and in offices and classrooms, particularly during these trying times brought on by the global COVID-19 pandemic and other recent natural disasters. Lord, we benefit from the labor of so many people, many of whom we never see. Thank you for their good work and faithful service. And thank you for our economy, which is struggling at this time, but nonetheless provides jobs and benefits to so many of our people. May our work always glorify you through Jesus Christ our Lord. And so we join in the Lord's Prayer as was taught by Jesus to his disciples. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Just to give you an idea of the agenda, we begin with an opening statement by the Honorable Premier. That will be followed by updates from our health team. We then go across to the Commissioner of Police for his updates, and then we will hear some remarks from the Permanent Secretary of Labor, Dr. Harrigan, and then we will take some questions and answers. So once again, all, welcome. We turn over now to the Premier for his opening remarks.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all. Thank you, Minister. I'd like to say Happy Labor Day to everyone, to those workers on the front line, those workers who continue to keep us safe. I'd like to say special welcome to Commissioner of Police, Mr. David Lynch, to Permanent Secretary, Mr. Foster Rogers, Ministry of Health, and to Dr. Aisha Andrew, our Chief Medical Officer. You know, it's because of people who do the work that we're able to do what we need to do. They keep the economy going. They also help to keep us safe, and they provide care for those who can't, and especially those in the stores, as you said, who continue to work on the front line to make sure they provide the services. But it's in this same vein that, you know, with COVID-19 and the introduction of it into Anguilla, this cluster has become bothersome to us. And definitely the only way we can get past this pandemic, which we've been fighting for over a year, which the health team has done a yeoman's task to keep us safe, our safety is now in question. And that is why we have to take certain measures. And so while we can't mandate that the general population be vaccinated, we encourage it. We are mandating and will have regulations to mandate that frontline workers in the public sector and in the private sector have to be vaccinated. And that is to ensure that that the health of the person, the individual, is protected, but also that they don't, you know, have decreased chance of passing on the virus if, God forbid, they become infected to others. And that is what we, as a responsible administration, have to do. We have to look out for the well-being of the community, of all of us. And so that is why. So I know that there is concern, but the only way that we can get to a sense of normalcy, where we can get back to this economy and getting back to where it was, with a chance to get it there, is vaccination. Certainly hygiene methods work, social distancing, physical distancing helps. But the only way that we can ensure that we have decreased chance of getting infected, decreased chance of getting really sick when we get infected, if we do get infected, and the really only chance of decreasing transmission of this virus and the chance that the variants can develop, because as the virus gets passed on, there's an increased chance as it multiplies that it gets mutated, and that's where the variants come from. So we have to protect ourselves and the people of Anguilla. So I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I'll turn it over to the moderator to continue with the agenda, and then we'll talk at the end. Thank you very much. Happy Labor Day.
Yes, thank you. Premier, there was an issue with your camera just now. You may want to rectify it. Yeah. Yes. So we now turn over to the health team for the updates. So PS Foster and CMO.
Good afternoon, all. So, thanks for having us at this cluster update, so we can update the community as to where things stand. So today, as of May 3rd, as of 3 p.m., we had confirmed a total of 64 persons linked to the cluster. That cluster that was identified on April 21st, of course. So we've tested more than 1,430 persons. I say more than because we haven't reconciled the figures from the hospital for the screening that they did from Friday to now. So we've done over 1,430 persons. The last case that we detected here locally was on Thursday, April 29th. However, literally within the hour before the press conference, we were notified by the International Health Regulations focal point that a person that traveled, and the preliminary information is that he was part of this exposure group. So somebody that traveled to the UK on the 19th has also tested positive in the UK. So that number is going to increase. You can see there are 65 confirmed cases out of the cluster. So I'm waiting further details from that individual as well. In terms of the breakdown, we have 23 females, 41 males, youngest 7 months, oldest 77 years old. Thus far, you would have noted last time we had one admission to the hospital, a young male with no underlying medical history that was admitted last Thursday to the isolation unit at the PAH. Well, subsequently, just last night, we had 2 more males admitted. Ages 56 and 43 years old, and these 3 gentlemen have been admitted for varying degrees of respiratory distress. So we have 3 hospitalizations to date. In addition, you would have seen from the bulletin that we have recorded 95 cases. That is because we had an extra case confirmed on Friday from the imported case that was reported on April 19th. Right, so bear with me. That person is a spouse, the household contact of that case that we had detected on April 19th. So that spouse had actually been in isolation/quarantine since the husband was identified on April 19th, the day before the cluster was identified. So that person is now added to our list because she tried to get a test for on a return travel to the US, and not surprisingly, that test has come back positive. So we have added that to our number. So at the time of writing, you'll see our 95 cases lodged, but based on what I told you from the International Health Regulations focal point, expect that number to go to 96 by tomorrow. So in terms of where the cases are coming from, and we have emphasized that at this moment where we're looking at the cluster in relation to common exposures and not local at this point in time, local is going to become more relevant if, God forbid, this thing extends beyond the cluster. But so far, most of the cases have been resident of South Hill, and then Blowing Point, 13 cases and 10 cases respectively, but really scattered throughout North Hill, Little Harbor, Island Harbor, scattered throughout the country, the commonality being the exposure settings. So we cannot emphasize enough how the developments of a short week have turned everything on its head for Anguilla, and Again, the thing that we said was the way out of this pandemic, the exit strategy. You look at what's happening in the world today, India and so on. Vaccination, vaccination, vaccination. We can't say it enough. We can't say it any differently. So in terms of our efforts, we have seen an increase in the uptake. Sadly, I guess due to these events, we're sorry that they had to take something like this to bring a lot of persons around. So on the portal to date, we have 7,711 persons registered. So far, 6,982 persons have received their first dose, and 2,811 of those persons have received a second dose. So I'm going to pause there.
Okay, so we go across to the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Foster Rogers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge. I really won't add much to that. I think the update is sufficient at this point in time. I would just implore persons to stay in place until we can indicate to the public of Angola that it is at a point where we have this thing managed, because it is critical that we reduce as much as possible moving around the country. And certainly we applaud the Royal Angola Police Force for assisting in this regard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. We go over now to the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Lynch. Mr. Lynch, good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me back, and happy Labour Day, everybody. First of all, I'll just give you the broad update of where we are. I'll do it the last 24 hours. The last 24 hours, we've had 6 land patrols. We've had 4 vehicle checks and 15 vehicles stopped. We've had 9 breaches of the regulations. I'll come back to those in a moment. We've had 9 persons be reported for those breaches. We've had 1 person arrested because they couldn't comply with the regulations. We've had 3 sea patrols. 2 of those resulted in boats being intercepted. And we've had 13 calls or emails to our confidential email line, and I'm really grateful for people coming in and reporting people. So we're currently investigating a party that was supposed to be held yesterday, which we are just trying to find out exactly what happened there, and if there is a party, we'll be reporting people. We've had reports about people attending a petrol station to get fuel when they're in quarantine, but that person's now been arrested. We've had people exercising on the beach, which is not satisfactory. We've had people driving after the 6 p.m. curfew. We've had 5 of those, so they've all been reported. We had a fishing boat go into it's alleged went into the south side of the island in breach of the regulations. That boat was intercepted yesterday. We're just in the case of building a prosecution file for that. And if we can prove that case, which I think we can, then we will certainly be looking to seize the boat. So that we're making requests for that as well. And we've just had an incident earlier on, which is slightly out of the Iron Dome remit, where a young person was found to be in the house of a person in quarantine. They're escorted back to their home address. They chose not to go to the home address. So there's a small high-speed chase, which resulted in the person stopping and then backing into the police car. So I think on that note, what I would really like to do is thank the 14,500 people on this island who are doing a fantastic job to actually comply with all the regulations and are really putting their heart and soul into protecting everybody. But I really would challenge the attitude of a very small minority of people who do not seem to be able to comply with the regulations and who are putting people at risk. So the policy is we will prosecute everybody, but we really, really would ask people to really comply with these regulations. It's imperative. You heard the Dr. Aisha say earlier on, the way out of this is vaccination with some social distancing measures. So people do need to get vaccinated. And if they are infectious and they leave those quarantine zones, then they really are putting other people at risk. So overall, it's been a really good, it sounds really bad, but it's been a really good last few days in terms of compliance. So I really would like to thank the 14,500 people that are absolutely committed to this process. There are very few people who we are currently in the process of prosecuting, and we will prosecute, and we will seek the harshest measures at court. I really would ask them to reflect deeply on their behaviour patterns, because they are putting other people at risk, and this is life-threatening risk if this breaks out and it will overwhelm the health directorate here. So please think about others, particularly think about the health directorate, and particularly think about the people who are vulnerable. You can hear the doctor talking earlier on, there are now 3 people in the hospital with respiratory distress. So please, people, if you are one of that small minority of people that are not complying with the regulations, please think twice before you decide to breach those regulations. And that's my update. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch. As you said, today is Labor Day. We would have circulated to the media all of the different speeches that were sent out this morning, so I'm not going to go through that. What I will do at this time is to invite the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Labour, Dr. Aidan Harrigan, to share a few remarks. Dr. Harrigan.
Thank you, Minister Hodge. I would like to join you and also Premier Dr. Webster in wishing everyone a happy Labor Day. As you indicated in your address, it has been indeed quite a tough year. Who would have imagined that 1 year on we would still be in this position where things are so unpredictable, and of course it's been tough on folks in the tourism industry. A lot of them who have lost their jobs are working on extremely reduced hours, and then because tourism plays such a big role in the economy, it trickles down to other businesses. Also for businesses on the other side, it has been hard to plan, as you can imagine, and so I have to be sympathetic to their woes as well. So in the ministry, as you know, we've been trying to actively manage the situation as best as possible to preserve employment where possible. And then finally, of course, we all go about our jobs normally without having to give much thought to being safe and healthy. But again, as this past couple of weeks have shown, that can go out of the window quite quickly. And I would like to join and to say, special thanks to the folks in the Ministry of Health and associated units and departments who have been really doing very well in terms of trying to manage the situation. Is not easy. So that's what I would have to add for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harrigan. So we now open the floor for questions to the health team, the police commissioner, or myself, or the PS Labour. Floor is now open. We have the Anguillian.
Yes, good afternoon, Minister, and good afternoon to the public. Happy Labor Day. Well, for what it's worth, we are in a situation where we can't celebrate as we used to, or as we would like to. But I have a couple of questions for the CMO. Have you heard yet from CARFA what the strain or what variant of this COVID-19 here in Angola is? And if so, how does it compare with the strains in places like India and Brazil and so forth? I mean, do we have a mild strain, or is it something that we should be very, very concerned about? How detrimental is it?
No, we haven't gotten those results as yet. We haven't gotten the results as yet. So the moment we get those results, we'll be able to make those comparisons.
There are 3 persons in hospital right now. How serious are they?
I would say the couple from last night were more critical than the previous. I don't like to comment because things change from moment to moment, but critical but stable was the last word I heard on the first admission. But the ones that were admitted this morning, last night, seem to be in a worse condition. However, I don't want to comment because I haven't gotten a recent update. But I mean, respiratory distress is already worrying, for them to be hospitalized. But fundamentally, it's respiratory distress of varying degrees.
I think the question as to the severity is less important by this time compared to whether they're there at all, whether they should be there at all. So I think it's critical for us to realize that once you enter hospital for any type of healthcare, it is a critical issue. It is something that we prefer not to happen. So really and truly wish them well, and we hope that they can get better real soon. So I don't think we should be concerned right now about the severity. I think we should wish them well and then hope and pray that nobody else ends up in the hospital, because that is the concern that we have. We know what can happen, and certainly we wish them well and hope that nobody else enters there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. We go across to Class FM.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. An update, Rogers, for you. I know that the 6th is approaching quickly, and that is the cutoff point for our national pause. Where are we with that? The status of the pause, that must be an area. Other area too, another question for you, in terms of the contact tracing at the hospital, an update on that area. Where are we with that update at this point in time? That's two. A third question for you, is we're getting rumors around here that there may have been someone who escaped quarantine isolation today or yesterday at some point in time. Any truth to those stories that are circulating? My newsroom was flooded with calls today in relation to that.
Hammer, we went to school together. I'm getting old, there's too many questions one time. The first one with regard to, what was the first one again, Hammer?
The first one would have been about.
Yes. We are actually working on the data for Executive Council now, for the report for Executive Council, which we report to tomorrow. We have an exco tomorrow morning. At that point in time, we'll make decisions about the pause. So I wouldn't want to preempt Executive Council. As you know, it is in the mandate of exco to make those decisions. So I won't make any pronouncement on that now. What I will say is by tomorrow, exco will make a joint statement between the Premier and the Governor, and at that time we'll know exactly where we are with regard to the May 6th date in terms of either extending or relaxing any restrictions. With regard to the person yesterday, I think the Commissioner did mention that somebody was arrested. Yesterday, I think you may be referring to that matter. If not, you can correct me, please, Commissioner. But certainly, yes, someone has been held with regard to breaching quarantine rules. With regard to the contact tracing at the hospital, I'll let the Chief Medical Officer deal with that one. But as far as I understand, that matter has been resolved.
So with regard to the contact tracing from the hospital, that's pretty much has been wrapped up. And thus far, we only gleaned a couple of, one household contact in each instance. So just household contacts of those persons that work at the hospital. So that's been wrapped up for the most part. But what I want to raise is that although we've had definitive links to the cluster thus far, we still need what we call the incubation period to see if we're really in the clear. So while we've gone 4 days without more cases, we still cannot rest and relax as yet, because we still have to look at going onward from the last positive case, if anything pops up between now and the next 4 weeks. So that's the thing to take home. So we're not quite out of the woods yet. We've exhausted the contact tracing for the immediate time, but we still have to be very, very careful in the next couple of weeks.
Chief Medical Officer, a question coming in for you. The persons that are now in hospital, were they vaccinated?
Oh, no, they weren't. The persons from the hospital? In the hospital. Oh, no. None of these persons were fully vaccinated. And there's also an issue of the timing of the vaccination and the purported exposure. So no, they weren't fully vaccinated, if at all. Because in one case, for example, the gentleman who had gone for the vaccination after the exposure period, so that would not have protected him. And in the second case, it was within a week of the exposure. So no, they would not have been protected at that point.
Okay, thank you very much. So we go across to Dawn Hodge of the Herald newspaper.
Good afternoon. I have 2 questions, but I'll ask one at a time. My first question is the regulations for mandatory vaccinations for frontline workers. When can we expect to see those actually published and enforcement starting to begin? That's my first question. I'm not sure who would answer that. I'm assuming the Premier.
Well, I can say that the Attorney General Chambers is working on those, and as soon as they're ready, we will have them out. Once we get them approved, we will have them out. So it should be shortly, but I can't give you an exact date.
Okay. And my second question is about the pause date of 6 May. If in fact 6 May is not paused or pause doesn't come about, or if it's relaxed some, there are people that are just asking that those who have received their first and second shots, vaccinations, and have completed the 3 weeks of, the total time required to be immune, that they be, that some consideration be given to relaxed liberties for these people, because one, they've done what has been asked of them, and two, they just feel that at this point, they shouldn't be grouped with others who have not taken the vaccination. So I just put that out for consideration. Thank you.
Yes, and that's certainly, those are certainly some of the things that we are looking at very, very closely.
Great, thank you.
I'll go over to the police commissioner. A question for you, sir. Persons would like to know, what is the path? There have been a number of persons reported in your various Iron Dome updates. You have been indicating a number of charges and prosecution. What is the path? What happens now that persons have been charged? What is the prosecution path?
Yeah, what happens is we've tried to avoid arresting people because obviously of the potential infection rate, should they be infected. But what the actual process is, we'll report people for summons. And what that means is we will report to the court that we have information and evidence that people have breached various regulations, and they'll be presented before the court, and the people will then be summoned before the court, and the court will then hear the evidence we've got, and then they can make the judgments on whether or not these people have actually breached the regulations, and if so, what punishment they wish to impose upon those people. So essentially we report people, we tell people in the street, you've been reported for summons. The prosecution team within the police force actually prepare the summons, and then we present that to the individuals, and we present the people. That then summons people to come before the court, and the court then hear the actual evidence against that person. The person can then either admit it or deny it. If they admit it, they get dealt with, and if they don't admit it, then obviously it goes to trial, and then there's a trial, and we find out whether or not there was sufficient evidence to convict that person, and again they will get dealt with by the court.
If I can just add to that, Minister Hodge, in extreme cases where we have belligerent persons or difficult persons to deal with who may be infected or be positive, who've actually breached quarantine, there are facilities available through the Ministry of Health where we can hold people. In fact, we do have one person held right now. So in extreme cases where the risk to the public is so great that we cannot endure not having that person detained, we do have ability under the regulations to hold persons until that person clears quarantine.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. We go across to Dan Gwilliam.
Thanks again, Minister. A question for the Premier. The government has repeatedly stated that $1,000 being paid to unemployed or underemployed persons cannot meet the needs of these receiving the payments. Is the government in a position to increase that allowance either by itself or with the assistance of others, such as developers, investors who have benefited from the free concession?
Well, the answer is no for the government being able to do it. In fact, because of how the economy is and the limited resources that government has access to, including the Social Security Fund, because remember, since July of 2020, the government of Anguilla has been paying that unemployment, underemployment benefit, even though it's being paid through Social Security for some persons and through the Ministry of Finance for those who don't qualify under Social Security. So the government is not in a position to raise that. We wish we could. And the sooner we could, get persons vaccinated, immune, protect the community, then we could, get the economy back on track. And that is, I know people don't want to hear about the economy. They don't want to, but that's the only way that government is able to procure funding. And we can ask developers, as good corporate citizens and out of the goodness of their heart to contribute. And certainly some have been. They've been paying their workers, even though they are not working. And even, Cuisinart is now closed, but continues to pay its employees. And other of the hotels have done that. The businesses have done that here in Anguilla. But it is what is concerning to us as an administration, that we want to be able to support the citizens of Anguilla as best we can, and that's what we're doing right now. But in terms of being able to increase that, or even to consider advancing it past May 31, those are significant concerns that we have. And certainly we need to be able to get that money in. And there are three ways government makes money: through foreign direct investment, where that is limited right now during this pandemic; through grants, those are also limited because the whole world is suffering from this pandemic and money is hard to come by; and three, through increased taxes. And at this point in time, with persons having limited employment, that is not a consideration. So that's where we are right now. And certainly we'd like to do better, but we cannot do better. And so it's up to us as a people to put ourselves in a position where we can improve the economy, and that requires tourism. That's our main industry. We're certainly looking to diversify. We are working on projects, but in COVID, those tend to move slow.
Before we go to Brenda, we go over to Foster.
Yes, Minister Hodge, I just want to support the Premier and report again on the links between a healthy economy and a healthy people. You cannot separate a healthy economy from a healthy people. It's just not possible. In fact, if we don't have a healthy economy, you cannot have access to healthcare. And there are two types of access to healthcare. There's physical access to healthcare, and there's financial access to healthcare. If you don't have a healthy economy in terms of physical access, government cannot provide hospitals, government cannot provide equipment, government cannot provide the salaries for doctors and nurses and healthcare workers to work. Government cannot provide access to primary healthcare. Government cannot provide access to medications. So government needs financial ability and a good economy to do that. On the other hand, if there's not a robust economy, persons do not have the financial means to have access to healthcare, whether it's need to have an operation, whether it's simply need to have access to nutrition, whether it's simply need to have access to a primary healthcare doctor. So I want us to understand the link between a healthy economy and a healthy population. You cannot separate them. So I want people to understand, yes, people complain that we want to talk about economy. But we talk about the economy because it's linked to a healthy population. It is linked to healthy persons.
Thank you very much. So we go across to Brenda Carty of the Herald.
Good afternoon. I have a question for the Commissioner. I know when it's going to the court, you can't give too many details, but I wondered just if you could give a few details of how it came about and how the person who yesterday was arrested. Thank you.
I can't really give the full details, but all I can say is the public's, I can't really say much more than that really, actually. It's, we can't really give the details because everybody deserves the right to have this matter heard before the court. But I can just echo really that we really would ask people to comply with these regulations. It's imperative now. So I can't really give any more details, but that's the main message sat behind what I've just, the sort of details of the cases I've given.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So I have two questions, I think, for the CMO and maybe Foster as well. The first one, are we seeing any increases in the number of young people between the ages of 18 and 35 now coming forward to be vaccinated? And the second question is in terms of the psychosocial support that has been provided for persons who are uncertain, they're at home, there may be mental issues, there may be other issues. What is the level of support being provided in those cases? Sorry, your phone is muted, Pastor.
Also, in the first instance, we did note an increase in persons 18 to 30 getting vaccinated and signing up for vaccination. The last we checked, it was at 44% of target. And for weeks and weeks, it was dragging below 20%. So that's quite an increase. I can update those figures for you shortly. In response to the question on the psychosocial support, there's actually a hotline for persons who need someone to speak to and guidance from there. So the number is 7233.
Okay.
And you can call that hotline to discuss any matters relating to psychosocial support.
Thank you very much. Okay, Dan Gwillian, you have your hand up?
Yes, my hand is up, in fact. Mr. Hodge, we listened to your address this morning for Labor Day, and you asked three very pertinent questions. Now, granted, we realized that for the past weeks, one of the hot button topics was vaccination, right? You asked three questions, and you didn't really answer the questions. I guess you just asked those questions for pondering, for thought. But I would like to ask one of those questions to you to see how you will answer it. You asked, what would be the future of individuals, frontline workers? What will the future be like for the private and public sector who simply refuse to take the vaccine? Can you please elaborate on that and give an answer? What will the future be like?
Thank you very much, James. I pose those questions because, as you will realize, this is an evolving issue. This is not a right or wrong. This is something that requires great depth of thought, consideration, research into the law, an examination of the constitutional rights of persons. So obviously, this is going to take some time, but at the end of the day, as Labor Minister, I believe that employers have a fundamental responsibility to ensure the safety of their workers, as in plural. I respect and government respects the individual rights of persons to take or not to take the vaccine. That is a personal choice. But at the end of the day, James, employers have a duty of care to the employers and the wider economy to ensure that the workers that they are putting on the front line are safe to do that, that those workers, even though they may be vaccinated, they can still carry the virus and take it back home to their families. An unvaccinated person in a frontline position poses a direct danger, not only to themselves, but to their families, the other workers, and the community. So it's a difficult question. It is not an easy question to answer. And as I say, the jury is still out in some respects on it, but it's something that I think as a government, as a people, we have to grapple with it because other countries around us are grappling with the same issues as we speak today. And we will have to ensure at the end of the day that the health of the workers, especially those in the front line, they are properly protected. I hope I've answered your question.
You have answered partially, but I want to ask this question though, following up. Are there any second thoughts that government has to mandatory vaccinations? And if so, how far does these regulations go actually? How far would the regulations actually go?
The Premier would have answered that, I think, in an earlier statement, where he said that we are currently working with the chambers to draft the necessary regulations and legislation. So he would have alluded to that. And like I said, I would prefer to allow that process to run its course. But the fundamental question still comes back to the safety of the wider working population in Angola. At the end of the day, I think government has that responsibility to ensure the safety of its working population.
Another question, Mr. Minister, in terms of the...
James, could you speak a little bit? You are sounding very hollow.
Sorry about that. I have my mask on. In terms of the election that has passed 2020, the APM stated during the election campaign that it was dissatisfied with certain aspects of the Labor Relations Act. And now that the APM is in office, what steps do you have you taken to move these concerns forward and addressing these aspects of dissatisfaction in relation to the workers' interest?
Well, James, pretty much since I took office, that was a matter of concern, particularly when we'd have had those massive layoffs in the hospitality sector. We have been working with the chambers ever since that time. I know some time has passed, but we have been working with the chambers ever since that time to initiate a review of that labor legislation. That review is ongoing as we speak with you today. And I know there are a lot of other demands being placed on the chambers at this time. And so we really do apologize for the length of time it has taken. But I can assure you that work is progressing and that the Labor Commissioner in her speech this morning will have spoken about that ongoing review. She also spoke about the continued work on legislation for collective bargain and also the workers' safety, rights, and so forth. So that body of work is ongoing as we speak, James. That was it, James? Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, sorry, one more question.
Yes, sir.
How many digital nomads are involved in the digital nomad program? And can you please explain how the investment in land and housing will work?
Okay, so the Digital Nomads program is a program that works like this. Persons come here from wherever, and they are doing their work at home from Angola. So they're not interfering with any local jobs or occupations. They are simply basically working from Angola. And we've had one or two requests now that they came to Angola, they saw how beautiful the place is and how safe the place is. They expressed an interest in investing in house and land. And under our alien landholding license, they can do that. And we were very pleased. I took at least one or two, I believe, to Executive Council for approval fairly recently. So they are coming to Angola, they are liking what they see, and they are intending to settle down and spend some further time here to that investment in house and land. And of course, to our alien landholding program, they can do that. In terms of numbers, I don't have a specific number for you at this point in time, but I know that there are quite a few persons that are currently enrolled in this program. Perhaps by the next press conference, I could update you on the numbers.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. So we go across now to Class FM, Hammer.
Yes, good afternoon, Minister Hodge again. While you're in that vein, though, can you update us on the study program? So how is that going and where are we with that program? That's one question for you. And the other question I have for health professionals, the status of the pharmacy. That's a question that I received from one of our listeners earlier. Where are we with that right now, the pharmacy itself at the hospital?
Right. So in terms of the understudy program, we have a draft policy that has been created. We would have sent it off to the International Labour Organization initially for their feedback. And we are still awaiting that, but it's our intention to roll it out very soon. But in the interim, even in terms of our work permit applications and renewals, we are still attaching increased conditions on those work permits. So we are not waiting even until we get a policy fully in place, we are now upping up in terms of our conditions that we are putting on the work permits. And those conditions speak very clearly to identifying persons into the understudy program that are capable of fulfilling that position. So we are working as we speak to improve that position when it comes to the understudy situation.
With regards to the pharmacy, you would have noted that the CEO indicated that until further notice, I believe that went out on Friday, that the pharmacy is in fact closed for non-emergency. Somebody's working for emergency delivery of drugs and medications at the hospital, but they're also liaising with the private sector to ensure that the medications are available, in particular Paramount Pharmacy.
Thank you. So we go across, I think, to Brenda. Brenda, you had your hand up?
Sorry, you were calling me? No, I don't have my hand up.
Okay. And William, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. I just want to ask the Premier a question again based upon that support for underemployment or unemployment. I don't really want to make it a hobby horse or to belabor the point, but Premier, you mentioned sometime a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, that you were prepared to ask the British for assistance with regard to, in the event that the extension be made after the 6th, for assistance in the program, in the aid program for our employees. How far is that going right now? Are you anticipating that?
Yes, we are now looking, the Ministry of Finance is evaluating the revenue loss effect of this past 2 weeks, and also if there's any extension of the pause, what that would entail. We are looking at that in terms of the effect on our recurrent revenue projections, and then we will go from there. Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, then I think we can begin to wrap up this press conference today. And I would like to start perhaps with the PS of Labour, Dr. Harrigan, to say a few closing remarks. Dr. Harrigan.
Thank you, Minister Hodge. Just to reiterate that it's we're really living through, unprecedented times. If we just not only here in Angola but across the world, if you look at the news, what's happening in India, what's happening in Brazil, and I mean, I noted some of the questions in terms of vaccination to do or not to do. I think in Angola we have to remember that we have very little margin for error. I think, and folks in the Ministry of Health can correct if I'm wrong, that there are 10 beds available. I think if there's critical, things get critical, you see already 3. So I think it's incumbent for folks, all of us, to give serious thought to how can we protect our loved ones, ourselves and our loved ones, because we don't want to have to second guess. And so I think for government overall, that question of the protection of private rights versus the public good, and so it's not an easy thing to have to decide, but and so I think if there's a means that we can protect ourselves for vaccination, I think people ought to give serious consideration for it, because I don't see, it doesn't seem as if this is going to go away in some kind of ordinary means, and so therefore it seems like vaccination is the key to really defeating this virus.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we go over to Foster. He had his hand up. So Foster, perhaps you could take your closing comments at the same time.
Sure. Thank you very much, Minister Hodge. I think we've learned from the past couple of weeks that this virus is no respecter of persons. It is no respecter of profession. It is no respecter of religion. It is no respecter of your creed. We now have a pharmacy that's closed. We now have a country that's shut down. We have our schools closed. We have certainly our stores that have to close at 4 o'clock and limited movement after 6. This is not a state where countries can maintain for any long period of time. Human beings are not persons who are not designed to be cooped up like this. I use the word cooped up because we are cooped up. So we have to understand that this is not only a threat to our economy, but this is a threat to our life. This is a threat to our well-being. I think we have to understand as well that the only way to get on top of it is for persons to take the personal responsibility to protect themselves and to protect their families. Vaccination is one route, yes, and we of course, we are moving to a point where we have to ensure that those persons who need to get vaccinated are vaccinated. The evidence is out there. When you look and see what's happened in the UK in terms of the drop in their numbers since vaccination, when you look and see what's happened in the UK, in the USA, last year, most of the cases in the US were persons in the over 50 age bracket. That group has been prioritized in terms of vaccinations for the past few months. That is no longer the case. You are now seeing young persons who are not vaccinated in their 20s and 30s, filling the hospitals in the US, filling the hospital beds, and these are the persons who are now getting sick, mostly because of the virus. So vaccination is working. The evidence is there. It is working. So we have to now look at our personal responsibility, not only to ourselves, but to our family, to our children, and certainly to the community at large, because all of us do have a responsibility to our community. And once we understand that responsibility, once we understand the need to protect our fellow men and to protect our brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and children, and we live up to the responsibility of that, I think we understand that we have to be vaccinated. My final word to persons in Angola. The virus in Angola is here. The only way we can limit that movement is to limit our movements. If we understand how this virus is transmitted, we understand that we need to limit our movements. During the day, between 6 and 4, when the stores are open, you are allowed to move out for essential purposes, and we know what those are. If you do not need to move about, please do not move about. In the Ministry of Health, as the Permanent Secretary, I have not left my home since Thursday afternoon because I did not have to go out. I moved about for one purpose, was to go to the store and go right back home. If there is no need to move about, please do not move about. I don't know how much I can express that. Even though we haven't had cases, even though we haven't identified cases since Thursday, that does not mean that there are not cases out there. And I want to underline that, and I need to repeat that. Because we have not identified cases since Thursday, that does not mean there are not cases out there. And I want us to be sure that we understand the difference between identifying cases and actually have cases in the community. So I implore you, please stay at home if you don't have to move about. Certainly after 6, there's no need to move out unless there's a need to get to the hospital or for services from the police here in Angola. Thank you, Minister Hodge.
Thank you very much. Dr. Andrew, do you have any closing comments? Dr. Andrew? Okay.
No, quite frankly, it's all been said. I am not one to keep talking and talking and talking about the same thing over and over, quite frankly. And we know the choices are tough. People have to make decisions. And is this an option, really? You know, I mean, is this what we want? Do we want to find ourselves in this position ever again? You know, so look at India, look at all the countries, look at what's happening around you. I have nothing else to say, to be honest. I don't know what else to say.
Yes, thank you, Doc. So we go across to the Commissioner. Commissioner, in terms of your closing comments, I just wanted to add 2 little things before you speak. One, a question came in about can special constables, do they have permission to be taking pictures of persons in quarantine? And the other question was basically about persons who violate the COVID. I answered that by saying that they can be charged. So, but the question is for you as you close up your comments, sir, can those special constables be taking pictures of persons in quarantine, especially persons who may not be COVID positive?
Yeah, I think in terms of the legality of it, we don't have an absolute power to take the pictures of those particular people. What we do is seek to get their support to make sure that we have that record of them being there, should there be any complaints against them. So we're just asking to work with people. We try not to ask for excessive powers. But on this one, we've been working very, very well with everybody. I got my photograph taken when I came, and it's just a request to be able to do that at this point in time. If we need to ask the government for that power, we'll ask the government. But actually, so far, we've not had that need to. And we don't want to be one of these organisations that keeps on trying to take away people's liberties. So we've asked people, and everybody has been very, very compliant. So we're very grateful for that.
Thank you very much, sir. And we give the final word to our Premier, Dr. Webster.
Yes, again, thank you. I want to thank, Permanent Secretary Dr. Harrigan. I think that he kind of wrapped it up in a nutshell as to what is essential so that, people can still continue to work, make a living, and certainly the right to work is not guaranteed. And so when we talk about mandating for frontline workers to be vaccinated, certainly if they choose not to, if there's a back of house job that's available and the employer chooses that they can do that, that is an option. Or there's just that they can choose, if they don't want to vaccinate, not to work. These are the things, again. It's sad that we have to get to this point where we have to be so tough and so harsh, but we understand how difficult it is. We understand this last 10 days have been, people have been restricted, and to be shut down like this is not helpful for anyone. We talk about the psychosocial effects, the mental illness. We have a hotline set up, SAFE. That's SAFE 7233. We have to be concerned about this, because then you increase the risk of domestic violence. So you increase, these are all social ills that can come about because of this need to protect ourselves and our people. And so vaccinating will help us to get there. This time now of staying at home, isolating, quarantining. If you're been told you're positive for COVID-19, there's no reason for you to leave where you are. I mean, you're putting too many people at risk. And so that is tantamount to if someone gets infected because of you and they die. Just think about that. And so, if you've been told to isolate, to quarantine, stay at home. If you are at home and you have to do something essential, we understand that between the hours of 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. But if you don't have to leave home, don't. And if you have to do something, then you do it quickly and get back home. That's the only way we can protect ourselves and protect the community. Now, I heard Dr. Leonard Richardson on Class FM earlier today. He was on last Thursday around noon. He was on today on a repeat. And certainly we understand, people have been saying, why don't we get Anguillian doctors who are abroad to speak to the people who have vaccine hesitancy? But that's happening. Keystone Graves on his show on last Wednesday had a professor from the University of Connecticut who talked about vaccination, talked about viruses, about the way it's transmitted, about how, there's no cure for viruses, for this one specifically, but vaccine decreases the chance of the rate of infection. It gives immunity, decreases the risk of hospitalization, decreases the risk of getting severe disease, decreases the transmission of the virus. This is something that, no matter how many conspiracy theories you listen to, when you check on the sources, you understand that that is fake news. Certainly, we understand about adverse reactions, the risk of blood clots, 4 in a million. They're rare. That is very rare. And so we're not minimizing it, but we are saying that the chance of you developing a side effect, an adverse reaction from getting the vaccine is low, and that the risk of that is so much lower than the risk of getting the infection and infection causing severe harm and morbidity to you. And so I can only say, let's vaccinate, let's help ourselves get healthy, help the community, so we can all, continue to get closer to normal as with the way we were. I mean, if you see in the United States, persons who are vaccinated are now able to go to sporting events. They're able to do things outside, and they can go back to the beach and things like that. We are stuck at home. And why? Because right now, COVID is in our community, and we want to put a stop to it. We want to curb it before it gets rampant. We have a cluster right now, but that cluster can get worse if we don't curb it where it is. And so that's why I'm saying stay home, get vaccinated. Let's save ourselves and save our fellow man and save this country. There are the COVID hotlines, which you can call 476-7627 or 476-SOAP, 584-4263 or 584-HAND, or the website www.beatcovid19.ai. And we can only do this for ourselves, and if things get bad, we only have ourselves to blame. But then we would have caused enough harm, and persons may die. We don't want this on our conscience, because, as you know, in Anguilla, we are all one family. So again, I want to thank everyone for the hard work that they're doing, and the Chief of Police, and the PS Health, CMO and Health Authority of Anguilla. I want to thank the ministers of government, governmental officials, everyone who's put their hands to the plow to curb this disease, to get us back to normal, to get us back to work, to get us to a point where we can continue to take care of the people of Anguilla. And so again, I want to thank you for listening, for being here. And our next press conference will be on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Of course, tomorrow, Executive Council will meet with the health team, and we will assess the situation as it is. And then there'll be a joint statement from Her Excellency the Governor and myself to let us know the way forward. Again, thank you very much. Stay home, stay safe. God bless you, and may God continue to bless Anguilla.